Welcome back to the WSU Democrats podcast. My name is Ethan Bishop. I'm the president of the organization.
I'm Vaughn. I'm the vice president.
I'm Micah, and I'm a joining member.
And today we have a very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Dakota Wurth. I'm running for state senate in District 5, and I'm currently serving Clearfield City Council Member, and I'm just happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome. So to warm up, the first question is, what's your story? What first pulled you into public service, and what made you decide to run for Utah State Senate District 5 now?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So I grew up in Layton, and I was always politically conscious. With the earliest introduction to me wanting to serve publicly was actually this TV show Parks and Rec. I grew up telling people that I wanted to be Utah's Leslie Knope. And as I progressed through college and the political environment that was happening at the national level, I just got more and more civically engaged. So when I was up here at Weber State, finishing my associate's degree, I got involved with the Bernie Sanders campaign and helped phone bank and go door to door and help raise awareness during that first primary. Took some time. Obviously, we all have a journey to find ourselves. By the time I was 25, I was able to purchase a house. I was fortunate enough to be working a job that made that possible. And I got settled in my community in Clearfield, and I looked around, saw that demographically we were very young. We were putting up a lot of housing that was for renters that maybe didn't have the same opportunities that I had. And then I looked at the city council and the government around me, and it was not matching those demographics. So I just said to myself, it's time to start talking for people who don't have a voice at the table. And that's what propelled me forward, and we were able to be successful in that mission. And then in that time frame, since I've seen the limits of what you can do at the local level, but also the impacts that the state legislature has on localities, I think it's important to bring that same sort of advocacy to our state capitol.
Yeah, and that kind of leads directly into this next question. So on the Clearfield City Council, you've been one of the youngest elected officials in Utah. How has being a younger leader shaped your approach to governing, and what do you think older politicians consistently misunderstand about what young Utahns are dealing with?
Yeah, so I am the youngest period to ever win an election in Clearfield. I was 27 when I won that election, and what I learned really, and the thing that really made the difference in the election too, is people really want to be heard. I think the general electorate and average resident sees government as out of touch and uninterested in everyday people's lives. And me and my husband, we knocked nearly 5,000 doors personally ourselves, talking to voters, finding out what mattered to them. It's really easy to enter a campaign and a race and say, this is what I want, and take out everything as far as consensus goes. But if you take the time to listen to people, not only will you be better informed in what matters to the people that actually live near you, you're going to have a better opportunity to grow your understanding of those issues.
Yeah, and I just want to maybe ask, how was that first race, being so young, running for Clearfield City Council? I mean, I'm sure it was terrifying, just being like doing something that's seemingly never really been done before. Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people running for office, period, is a deeply personal decision. It's also a deeply public decision. So the second you put your name to file, people are looking at you, people that you've never met, people that will have all sorts of perceptions about you that you can't change, right? And it was really based on a hope and a prayer at the start. Self-funded the entire campaign until people started getting energized. Always came forward with the mentality that we were in last place, but nobody was going to outwork us. So we didn't know with certainty what to expect on election day, but I think what we learned too is that voters reward effort, and we worked the hardest out of anybody in the field, and that really showed.
As a Clearfield City Council member, what's one thing you're proud of accomplishing, and how does that experience shape what you'd actually focus on in the Senate?
Yeah, so I'm really proud that we've invested a lot in beautifying our city and in public art. We've got a lot of murals that have gone up and that are coming up. It's the visible element of how government can better the community, right? And I think that's the general theme around why I'm running for the state legislature is people want to see more visible progress from their representatives. They want materially better conditions for their lives and for the people around them and for the actual environment that they live in, whether that's restoring the Great Salt Lake or making costs go down. Those are going to be the objectives that we go forward with and we fight for with a passion.
You want to turn your mic just a tiny bit? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, so now about priorities. If you win, what are your top 3 priorities for District 5 in your first session, and what bills or policies do you already have in mind?
Yeah, so the 3 priorities are very straightforward, and I touched on them in the last question. It's tackling affordability, centered around attainable housing for home ownership, accessible childcare so that people can take their economic outlook into their own hands, and achievable healthcare, right? So that people have access to the care that they need so that they aren't burdened by the costs or the lack of care and the actual health impacts surrounding that. The second priority is around smart climate policy. We need action, and we need action now on the Great Salt Lake. If we don't act and start getting more water into the Great Salt Lake Basin, this entire district is going to be unlivable in the near future. And then it's working on policy that makes the American dream achievable for everybody in the district. We have a lot of job centers in this district with Hill Air Force Base, with federal jobs around the Treasury and the IRS, and we need to support those economic drivers. But as far as specific bills that are under consideration right now, one thing that I find really appealing to deliver for people in the district and statewide is removing sales tax from food. Point blank period. We can do that. That's going to immediately bring down costs for families who are struggling. And in past sessions, the legislature has toyed with this idea, but they've gate kept it behind reducing or removing income tax restrictions around that type of funding. And we can just skip that whole thing and deliver cheaper grocery bills for people next session.
So would you have to come up with an alternative to fund that that gap of money that would be lost from that sales tax?
Yeah, I mean, sure, there's a lot of different ways that we can make up that gap. Generally, and this might preempt some of your questioning, but I think having more of a progressive tax rate structure as far as income tax goes will solve a lot of those problems.
Yeah.
All right, so now about GOP power grabs. In your view, what has been the most serious GOP power grabs in Utah over the last few years, whether that's gerrymandering, attacks on ballot initiatives, court/power restructuring, or preemption of local control? What do you think?
You really touched on all of them. They're all kind of near and dear to my heart, but I'll hone in on 2. The one that we're really seeing very visibly right now is the effort to repeal Prop 4. Voters said very clearly that we want better representative government in the state of Utah. It took them 7 years in a variety of court cases for that to even come to fruition, and it's still not finalized. But they're spending all this money, taking outside resources to repeal that, when I think now more than ever, people actually, if you put it on a ballot, will tell you it's a 65-35 issue instead of a 50-50 one. So that has been really frustrating to watch because there are so many worldviews that are underrepresented in our government because of the way that our state has been gerrymandered. And to tie into that, local control is so essential, but because the legislature, in an effort to preserve their own power, has only chosen to act on housing specifically because it's become a crisis and massively unaffordable, and desire to take away zoning control away from municipalities, you're seeing kind of the reckoning come into play of their lack of action and their ability to subvert the will of everyday people and voters. And it's been challenging to deal with and challenging to watch.
Yeah, I didn't know about the whole zoning thing. Could you maybe tell us more about that? They want to have the building of the homes and all that be done by the legislature, and they're limiting the locality's ability to do that kind of thing?
So effectively, part of the problem we have with housing costs is the scarcity of housing. And for years and years and years, we just haven't built enough. And a part of that is many places are zoned in a way that it's not conducive to doing denser developments or cheaper attainable housing structures in those zones. But now that the legislature is saying, hey, our housing costs are astronomical relative to the rest of the country, we're going to take away your flexibility in zoning and deciding how your communities are shaped. And it's not the right approach to a crisis that has been born out of inaction. It's really ineffective. We should be bringing local leaders into the fold. And this is why it's important, in my perspective, that local leaders serve in the legislature. I think we have less than 10, maybe even less than 5 at this stage that have served in local government outside of the state level. And that informs poor policy decisions, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that there's a very good argument for someone who, was a politician on the local level, then working their way up. That's the reason why a lot of the time that is the path, because you gain experience as you go, as you climb the ladder. So I think that's great. But since, the GOP has engaged in these power grabs, what's your plan to fight back effectively when Democrats are in the minority? How do you build coalitions, use media/public pressure, and force accountability in committee rooms?
Yeah, I think a huge part of this conversation is something that I've really come to grips with is we've never really, in a meaningful way, defined what a Utah Democrat is, because we've never held power, and there's this perception that we will always lose elections. So viable candidates don't run and therefore don't talk to voters. And if we're going to build a coalition and build support to even bring the supermajority back towards the middle so that we can start working on policy that starts helping people right away, that starts absolutely with winning these seats so that they're forced to not hide behind that supermajority, but also speaking loudly and unapologetically for the issues that people across the entire political spectrum can get behind. And that's affordability, that's sustainability as far as our environment, and that is making sure that your kids, their kids, have the same opportunities that our parents, our grandparents had that we don't and they won't. And that's an undeniable message that I think will resonate with actual people that care about this community.
Anyone else have any questions before I ask some more?
Yeah, just kind of going off of that one, a lot of Democrats in Utah kind of feel like their voice is underrepresented and kind of feel like the majority of Utah is kind of can be, sort of hateful to some groups of people. So I wanted to get your opinion on Trevor Lee, and then also if you were to be elected, how would you kind of be a combat voice against him to represent the people that he is kind of sort of attacking in some ways?
Yeah, so I'll preface my answer to this question with something I want to just clarify. I believe if we're going to reach people, we're going to talk about ideas and not people. But Trevor Lee is the representative for the neighborhood that I grew up in, where my parents still live. And I'm the first openly gay elected official in Davis County's history. So to see that sort of representation for a neighborhood and group of folks that I know are not that hateful is really disheartening. I'm confident that he won't win re-election, but that doesn't mean his ideas will go away if he's not in the legislature.
Yeah.
So what I'll say to that is I'm unapologetically myself. I literally have a rainbow tattoo on my arm right here. I've always prided myself on being a big guy that stands up for the little guy. And what our legislature needs to stop doing and wasting their time on is punching down on marginalized communities and again start delivering in material ways for everybody in this state.
Yeah, that's great.
I had a question as well.
Yeah.
Given that so many Democrats here in Utah obviously don't feel like they have major representation, what would you say to people who don't really feel like their vote matters in Utah because they're of the Democratic Party or just currently not the majority?
I will tell anybody and everybody, make sure you are registered to vote and vote in every election. Because it's easy to feel a lot of malaise around presidential cycles specifically because our vote really doesn't matter as much. This is very much a Republican state at the national level. But many of these politicians end up in scenarios and offices like mine at the local level, and they can espouse your ideas in a more honest way and a nonpartisan way. Get involved locally. If we can out-organize and start winning on the merits of ideas, the validity of that voice gets stronger, and you start reaching more people, you start getting more people. This is how you build broad coalitional support. It starts at the grassroots level. We're not going to change the Electoral College in Utah, how we vote overnight. It's going to be a multi-decade project, but we can change the makeups of our city councils and our school boards.
And I'd say you could do it faster than a lot of people think, because at the beginning of the semester, the group was pretty much just Ethan running everything. And then I joined and helped him with stuff. And then once we started tabling, we would get comments all the time, people coming up. I always see the other groups tabling, on the other side of the political spectrum. I didn't know you guys were out here, or it's like, it's so great you're out here. So, these people are out there, but we just, like you said, get organized and just, let your voice be heard.
Yeah, and also like break through the noise, right? It's easier than ever to silo yourself. Like if you feel alone, because the algorithms that you consume and the media that you consume, if you're consuming content that reaffirms that feeling, it's only ever going to get worse. And just talking to people. And like, I've talked to a ton of voters just running for city council, and I've learned, like, even though we vote predominantly Republican, and this is why I think as Utah Democrats we need to better define what that is, people are not super ideologically calcified as Republicans. They're just culturally persuaded to vote that way in a lot of ways.
All right, so now on democracy. What reforms would you support to protect democracy in Utah? Well, keeping independent redistricting, stronger ballot initiative protections, transparency rules, ethics reforms, or limits on partisan meddling in elections? What do you think?
So certainly all of the above, but the things that are most top of mind to me are open primaries. We need to do away with the caucus convention system because it lends itself to affording fringe candidates access to a ballot that they otherwise would not win. And that's how you end up with the representative in my parents' neighborhood. That's how you end up with poor representation in a lot of places, especially smaller counties where you have strangely partisan offices like your county assessor that are decided in county convention, and you get one name on your ballot. And that's because if you get 60% of the delegate support at county convention as a Republican or 55% as a delegate, then that's the only name you're going to see on the ballot unless someone gathers an insane amount of signatures. Like for my race, that is 2,000. For the congressional races, it's 7,000. And it's grassroots in its approach, but in practice it leads to people paying a ton of money to get people out to gather those signatures, which in turn means only really wealthy or highly wealthy donor-supported candidates end up in our government. So that would be the most immediate and, in my opinion, attainable reform that we could make.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about it like that, that if you don't get all that support at the convention, you have to get a certain amount of signatures, and it obviously costs time and resources to get all those signatures. I can imagine just seeing, all the signature gatherers here at Weber, just, clawing for signatures and how aggressive they are, how hard it could be if you're not doing that, just trying to get support. But yeah, interesting. So now on to reproductive rights. Where do you stand on reproductive freedom in Utah, and what concrete policies would you support to protect patients and doctors, especially around exceptions, access, and privacy?
Yeah, I say this all the time. I'm a big proponent of a woman's right to choose. I think it's not intellectually honest for me as a man and a gay man to say, I'm going to legislate a woman's body. That's not my place. I'm also not a doctor. I have no credentials or qualifications that would tell you, hey, this guy should be writing policy on medical procedures and innate human rights, in my opinion. So I believe codifying Roe v. Wade at the national level, at the state level, whatever is feasible, is the right approach. And just protecting that right, because I think it's foundational as far as our humanity goes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the hard thing right now is with Utah trying to ban reproductive rights, which are all of the bills that they're currently trying to put through are jammed up in the courts. I have hope. Well, I don't really have hope, but I would like to see the Utah legislature do something to protect reproductive rights, but it just seems like that's not going to happen. I hope we do have many great progressive victories, such as you, in the 2026 cycle. But I think realistically what's going to happen is the federal government is going to eventually have to step in and codify Roe versus Wade. For me, I think that's the only way out of it. That's the only way we're going to stop these extreme abortion bans. Because this on the state level, these right-wing states gerrymander all of their state legislative districts, and it's going to be impossible to do anything on that level. So,
Yeah, I will say in the interim, though, protecting the judiciary's independence is super important because they have held the line in a lot of ways and in a lot of red areas to ensure that legislatures can't come in ham-fistedly and gut those protections.
Yeah.
And I think if you put it on a ballot, a constitutional amendment to remove abortion bans from the state constitution, I think it would actually pass in this state because
Yeah.
people have a common sense approach. They don't want government in their doctor's office. Like, I cannot even begin to imagine what it is like to be someone who is going through a pregnancy to make that decision to terminate the life of that fetus. Like, I don't have the capability to do it. I know it's deeply painful and personal, and like, get that out of public policy.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so now public lands plus the environment. How would you defend public lands, clean air, and water, especially with pressures from development, extraction, and the Great Salt Lake crisis? What specific steps would you prioritize?
Well, certainly we can't be selling these public lands to developers for resource extraction. I think what we do is we have to start outlining how unfeasible it is to build housing in these areas. Like, you're not going to have the infrastructure or the population or certainly the water to support like a huge housing development in the middle of nowhere on the edge of like Goblin Valley. Like, none of this is ever going to happen. The only viable way to use that land is either to make it inaccessible for the public or to extract resources. So either you're extorting people or you're extorting those resources. So in policy and legislation, whatever we can do to restrict that from happening is something that I would be in broad support of.
Awesome. Okay, so now housing plus cost of living. What would you do at the state level to bring down housing costs and help renters / first-time buyers in Utah without letting developers write the rules? Sorry if we already touched on this a little bit earlier.
No, this one is actually the one where I probably bring the most experience to the fold. Professionally, I worked on affordable housing initiatives for 2 years. I ran Davis County's affordable housing programs and down payment assistance programs. I've helped over 40 families who are low to moderate income purchase a home in the county. And like, that sounds like not a lot, but when the average price of a home in Davis County is $600,000, we are talking about a lot of money to make that happen. And the state has allocated a lot of resources for first-time homebuyer programs through Utah Housing Corporation if the home is under, I believe, like $430,000. But because people can't qualify for homes, those funds aren't getting spent. So we need some sort of reallocation of that funding to either incentivize the building of, in my opinion, condos rather than rentals. There has been a ton of market rate rental housing that's gone up in the area over the past couple of years, and we need to shift the paradigm towards stuff that people can own. If we deregulated condo building, which is the biggest like barrier for developers to build a condo rather than a large-scale apartment complex, we're going to see a lot more economic opportunity around housing for people, because outside of starting your own business, owning your home is the easiest way to start building generational wealth. So the funding is there. Let's weaponize it so that things come out of the ground that people can own and don't become perpetual rental havens. And renting is great, but if you don't have the opportunity to buy, supply and demand is going to tell you the things that you can purchase will always go up.
Yeah, that's a good point. It just seems like, especially for us young people, like owning a home just seems like so, out of reach for us. Like for me, just thinking about owning a home, it seems like it's just never going to happen. So it is encouraging to hear, people trying to make a change.
And it's like, I'll speak to my personal side of this. Like, I worry for anybody younger than me, even people my age. When I was buying my house, I was just a single guy, had 20 grand to my name. It took 73 different offers on houses over 9 months before someone would tell me yes. I routinely got outbid by like 100 grand over list. The only reason I have my house today and have the opportunity to build that generational wealth is because I had my offer in 5 minutes before the listing, 5 minutes after the listing went live. Waived every contingency, made everything I have to my name non-refundable. Like, these are the conditions that we're in right now, and the rates back then were 3%. So now you double the cost of financing. I don't see how anybody makes it without being burden for a lifetime.
All right, now on education. Utah teachers are stretched thin. What's your approach to public education funding, teacher pay, class sizes, and pushing back on ideological interference in classrooms?
This feels like a crazy thing to say, but we need to invest in our teachers and our educators and give them the resources that they need to succeed rather than diverting them for private education. It's really not that radical, but what we've done at the state level in my lifetime is the complete opposite, and we're getting results that are not in line with what we should be getting out of education. And the fix is simple. Stop trying to take money away from public education. Stop trying to censor the education that kids can receive K through 12 or in higher ed, and let the educators, again, the people who understand what they are doing, have the tools to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's like the same answer for reproductive rights. Let the doctors and the women involved make those decisions in education. Let the teachers and those involved in education make those decisions.
Absolutely.
All right. So just the last few questions. What policies would you support for working Utahns? Wages, union rights, paid leave, healthcare costs, or workplace safety? And where do you think the legislature has failed people in this regard?
I think the immediate failure that we can see is we still have a minimum wage in this state that mirrors the federal minimum wage. $7.25 in any community in this state is a poverty wage. You're not going to be able to afford to make ends meet if you're making that. I think something that we could do is index that wage to either something crucial like the cost of housing or the cost of living, so that people are seeing actual wage growth in their everyday lives. I think over the last 50 years, wage growth, real wage growth, has been stagnant in this country, and that's true of this state. But the cost of everything, even year over year, is outpacing the cost of wages. So it's like something has to give.
Okay. Any more questions before I go with the closing questions?
I just had a quick question circling back to climate. I'm not from here, but I'm told that it's unusual to not see snow this time of year. I'm told it's a very strange thing.
Yeah.
I obviously have no scale of reference. It snows like once every 5 years in Texas, but like, what changes would you push forward to ensure that the climate does have a healthier future?
Yeah, so I'll say this definitively. This is the craziest non-winter we've had in my lifetime. I think we're stuck in October purgatory right now. I think it snowed one day at my house this season. I cannot believe it. And so much of ensuring that the climate change in this area doesn't reach a point where we can't get it back is supporting and sustaining the Great Salt Lake and restoring it to the levels that allow for natural lake effect snow to come into this area. And working on policy that is smart on the environmental front, so that we aren't destroying the environment around us and polluting in ways that make it so that the state is unlivable. Because it's not just the winters, it's not just the Great Salt Lake, it's also the air that we breathe. And as the Great Salt Lake recedes, the dust that dries up enters the air. As we are in inversion conditions and precipitation doesn't come down, then we're creating like this greenhouse effect of poison for our lungs, and it really worries me. Obviously, the state invests a lot in cloud seeding, and frankly, if it's what it takes, we need to crank that up a notch, then let's do it, because this winter is the most glaringly obvious conditions where it's like what we're doing is not working, and we're on the precipice of spring, and we're getting no snow, and that snowpack directs so much of the water flow in this state.
All right. So when you're first considering running, for city council that is, what did you wish someone had told you, and what advice would you give a young person who wants to run but doesn't have money, connections, or insider support?
I would say two things. Local politics, even though it's local, is still politics. Know where to prioritize building relationships and who your allies are. And then secondly, you can't change the world by yourself in one day. I think it's really easy to ride the momentum of like, okay, we did something, now let's do everything. and I jumped on a lot of things and maybe did not allocate my resources and my time quite as effectively as I could. So I've learned how to better time manage on that front. And that's true for a lot of areas of life, right? Like whether you're starting a family or starting a new job, pace yourself, understand what your comfortability is and where you can start to grow, and then lean into that heavily, but don't burn yourself out.
All right. Now, this is the very last question, which you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but for students and young voters who feel like Utah politics is rigged and their vote doesn't matter, what do you say to them, and how can they plug in to help you win and help build long-term power?
Yeah, so I'll say what I said earlier. Stay engaged, stay involved, talk about the things you're passionate about, because if you're not talking about it, people are only listening to the other side of the argument. And if all your legislators are hearing stuff that reaffirms their values, they don't have to consider yours. So be loud, be unapologetic. And you can do that by supporting candidates like myself in flipping what I think is the most flippable state Senate seat in the entire state that nobody's talking about yet. And you can support candidates in a variety of ways. You don't have to give financial contributions. You can volunteer your time. You can just even let 3, 4, 5 people that you know that live nearby know that there's a candidate that you're excited about that's talking about those things that you care about. There are a lot of ways that you can get involved, even just sharing stuff online. It goes a long way. We all have some level of reach. We have to exercise it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like how when the signature gatherers, and we'll talk about this more in the normal podcast, but how the signature gatherers were out there, lying to people, not giving them the full context of it. So then we set up the table telling people not to sign it and giving people forms where they could fill out to remove their signature. Not only did we do that, but I had recorded 2 videos, one on Thursday and then one on the Friday, of describing what was going on. And those videos now have thousands of views. And it seems like, that just spread the message even more not to sign these petitions, and it kind of just amplified the message. So I think what you said about posting on social media, very important as well. So do we have anything else you'd like to ask before we wrap up the interview?
Yeah, just one final question.
Yeah.
Giving the political climate right now and like the violence, and so many people are like, oh, you're on this side of the spectrum, you're against me, or oh, you're on the other side, you're against me. And then obviously what happened at UVU. When I first came here, I was told that Utah was a very safe state, and I looked online, there was no headlights. And I was like, oh, great, it's a safe state. But since being here, I've seen shooting after shooting, girls going missing, and rape cases. It doesn't really feel like a safe state, even though I myself have not seen much of it. Just how do you feel going forward that you would push for a safer state in Utah without obviously overstepping and then breaching into people's comforts?
Yeah, so I think all those things are very real. We're in a kind of bit of an environment where like the 24-hour news cycle and like TikTok and stuff proliferates a lot of this messaging. Utah, like by the crime rate statistics, is very safe comparatively. We can certainly do better, especially around political violence. That's where you see the most noteworthy things as of late, which has been really unfortunate. So bringing that climate down will help. Having common sense investment in public safety will also help. But at the end of the day, I don't want it to get lost that this is a very safe community comparatively. And I know it can feel scary at times because a lot of the stuff that you see whenever you open your phone or turn on TV is, oh, this violent thing happened down the street. It's actually been a critique I've always had in growing up here, is people would paint Ogden as this massively violent and ghetto area when it's like you can walk down any street in Ogden most of the time and be like completely safe. You're not in any danger. And it's really unfortunate that we let those tragic events get sensationalized in a way that makes us feel like we can't go outside, that we can't be in our communities when we absolutely can. And they need us more than ever to be out, even though it can feel like we shouldn't be.
All right. Well, I think that's it for the interview. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope everyone has a nice day or night, everybody. See you later.